Before we start the show, I want to thank and recognize our sponsor, Christy McCullough, and her Mobile, Alabama firm, Empowered Family Law, empowering families to navigate difficult changes and create new beginnings.
I've often said, I didn't choose this. It chose me, and I do think there are times in your life that you encounter pivotal moments, and depending upon which way you go, it's going to alter the direction and the course of your life. And this certainly did mine. Don't let other people or just complacency or not knowing what to do or giving you a good, clear answer be a reason for you not to do something. I would rather do something and fail than not do anything at all.
Hey everyone, this is Rod Cate, and welcome to this week's episode of Rocket Motivation. This week's episode is about elder abuse. This week's guest's mother, who was elderly and reliant on caregivers, suffered theft by a caregiver. This betrayal of trust devastated this week's guest's mother, and she was never the same afterwards through her death. This week's guest was angry and felt rage about what happened, but she turned her rage into something good. She worked tirelessly to have a law enacted in Alabama that requires individuals convicted of elder abuse to register, somewhat like a sex offender registry, to allow companies that hire caregivers to check the database before hiring. The name of the law is Shirley's Law, named after this week's guest mother. This is a great story with a meaningful result. Jo Holcombe, welcome to Rocket Motivation.
Thank you so much.
Well, Jo, we're glad you're here. So kind of tell us about yourself, kind of what you do, now, presently, where you live, kind of just catch us up.
Well, I'm from Mobile, and right now I'm spending the bulk of my time really getting the word out about Shirley's Law and advocating for elder justice and trying to learn as much as I can about that.
All right. Well, let's go back. Let's talk about what happened with your mother. Kind of just, give us, what the story is, what happened with the theft, and, how your mother reacted. Just take us through that.
It occurred in October of 17, and we thought we had found an angel. The caregiver had an amazing personality. She was able to handle Mother physically beautifully. Mother felt confident with her. She could pick Mother up out of bed, put her in the wheelchair, transfer to the car, and we just thought it was an answer to prayer. And in many ways it was, until we found out that she was stealing checks and then forging Mother's name. Thankfully, the theft was caught early, and my mother was not financially devastated, thank goodness. And the financial loss, I never want to minimize that because it was significant. However, the emotional fallout that occurred once Mother knew that this had happened was what was so devastating. Mother was in disbelief in the beginning that the caregiver would do that to her. Mother grieved. She had lost a companion. She had lost someone she had trusted. But she had also lost her sense of peace and security in her own home. And that sense of loss lasted for the rest of her life, 7 months, or as I say, 212 days.
Well, you find out about this, obviously. And so when you found out about it, how did it affect you?
At first, I thought Mother had just made an error in her bank account. I was in disbelief too, until I went to the bank and the branch manager showed me the checks and the proof. And I simply sat in her office and cried. I felt the betrayal. I felt the loss, just like my mother. I had come to rely on this person so much and trusted her so much with my mother, and knew that when I would leave the house, I felt confident that Mother was well cared for. And to know that she had been doing this the entire time, I was so angry. And I don't think the anger fully came out in the beginning. I think it was just sadness. And then it eventually resulted in the anger, especially when Mother was fundamentally changed by it all.
Yeah. Well, and I guess, with an older person where you put your trust in somebody and they completely devastate that trust, especially for an older person who's relying on that person, it's got to be horrible.
Yes. My mother could not turn over in her bed by herself. And I can't imagine what it would be like to be that physically dependent upon someone else. Her mind was cognitively intact, but her body had given away. And she relied on people to meet all of her basic needs. And I can't imagine the fear that I think she felt, rightly so, knowing that the person she had trusted was betraying her, and then wondering if all the other caregivers would betray her as well.
Okay, and so you got anger, you're enraged. What do you decide to do?
It took me a while. I would say to people that this happened, and people would shrug their shoulders and say, well, what are you going to do? And that angered me. I think everything in the beginning angered me because they were right. No one had a really good solution. And eventually I started saying, well, I don't know, but I'm going to do something. And I'll let you know when I figure it out. Because the anger inside of me was scary. And I was frightened of the way I was beginning to feel inside. I had never felt that much negative emotion towards anybody before. And I knew that that was bad for me. Once Mother died, and I could truly process everything that had happened and could take my breath away from just the day-to-day caregiving aspect, it was then I started really reflecting upon what had happened and how to handle it. And the thing that came to me was that with everyone just shrugging their shoulders, basically we as a society were desensitized to the crime. Everybody knew it happened because everybody knew someone that it had happened to. And when that occurs, the revulsion about it just kind of goes away.
Well, and so what do you decide to do?
That's when I decided that I needed to re-stigmatize it. I did research. I realized that in my mind, the most stigmatizing crimes were sex abuse and pedophilia. And I looked at those laws and I thought, okay, I'm going to see about trying to craft a law that will re-stigmatize elder abuse that is very similar to the sex offender registry.
Okay, and you're not a lawyer.
I am not a lawyer.
So this is something completely new. You have an idea.
I have an idea.
Okay.
I'm an angry daughter with a good idea.
With a good idea. Now you got to try to put it in play because I guess you looked at this. There are no other there's no laws in the country about this, right?
There are not.
Okay. And so I assume you did some research and you found that out.
Right.
Okay. So you want to start that in Alabama. So what do you do?
Well, I asked a few people, and at first they laughed at me and said, good luck. That kind of made me mad too. Everything was making me mad, I think, in the very beginning. But I called Representative Victor Gaston, and I told him my idea. And thankfully, he is a kind, compassionate man who had relied on caregivers for his wife when she was ill. And he thought that there was a law like that. But he said when I insisted there wasn't, he listened to me. And he said he would research it. And he was a man of his word. He called me back in about 10 days and said, you're right, there's not. And I've got my lawyers on it. And I will work on it, and I will see what I can do for you.
And then how did it proceed?
Slowly. The wheels of justice and the wheels of the Alabama State House do turn slowly. But he kept me up to date. And he kept telling me at every step of the way, don't think this is going to pass. Understand that bills rarely become law. And they rarely, if ever, become law the first year. So please don't get your hopes up.
He's tempering your expectations.
Yep.
And how did that make you feel? Did that make you angry also?
No. For one time I didn't get angry. I told him this law is going to pass. And I think at that point I frustrated him. I knew once I got someone to listen to me, and I don't know why. Logically, I should have listened to him. I knew that it was going to pass. He kept telling me, the seatbelt law took 5 years to pass. Jo, this law is not going to pass the first year. And I said, it's going to pass. He says, we don't have the money for it. I said, it's going to pass.
And so how did it pass?
Well, the commissioner of DHR, they caught wind of this, and they approached him. And I will tell you that I think, as a woman of faith, I think God just put people in the right place at the right time. And they found out that he had this bill. They said, we've been thinking about doing a registry. A lot of state DHRs have a registry for people that they have done investigations on. But there's not ever been a law about people convicted of the crimes put on a registry. They said, we would like to join forces. And so they had the budget and they put up the money. And through all the process, they together joined forces. They started lobbying, and lo and behold, it became a law the very first year.
And so what was your role? I know the inception of this was your idea because of what happened with your mother. Were you on top of this the whole way going through until it became a law?
Yes, I tried very hard. In the beginning, I was calling Dr. Gaston's administrative assistant, and she very wisely showed me how I could go to the legislative site and see where the bill was at each step of the way. So then I began stalking it. And each time I knew that the bill was coming up for any kind of vote or reading, I would research and email everybody on the committee. And I would tell them a little bit about the bill, HB 105, because I never wanted them to think of it as a piece of paper. I know these men and women who govern for us are so busy, and they see so many bills that they have got to, just be inundated with paper. And I didn't want them to think of that bill as another piece of paper.
Right. So you're personalizing this bill
Yep.
by talking with them and telling them how important this is.
Yep.
And so it passes in the first year. So first of all, how do you find out that it passes?
I knew that it had passed both the House and the Senate because I had been watching on the live streams. And I wanted to be there when it went to be signed by the governor. And so I called her scheduler, and she told me that the actual bill signing was not something that I could attend, but there would be a ceremonial signing, although she could call me the day that the bill was actually signed. And she did. I had moved into a new location the day before, and I had boxes upon boxes stacked around me, and the phone rang. And it was the scheduler, and she said, Ms. Holcomb, I just wanted to let you know that 30 minutes ago, Governor Ivey signed your bill. And I just sat down on the floor and started crying. I was sobbing, and she said, are you okay? And I said, Alabama just made history.
And give us a brief kind of an overview. What Shirley's law actually does. What is that law?
It mandates the formation of a registry upon which anyone convicted of abuse, elder abuse, neglect, financial exploitation, or abuse, neglect, financial exploitation of an adult in need of protective services. So you don't necessarily have to be an elderly person, which by legal definition is 60 or above in Alabama. You can be 18 or older and in need of protection, and this still happen. You will go on this registry for life. If you're convicted, you will be on that registry for life. And just like with a sex offender registry, it will be your name, your address, a little bit about the offense, and all the details pertaining to it. Likewise, DHR, they can open an investigation and they can put you on their registry. That is not for life. At some point in the future, you can appeal, although it's not guaranteed that you will get off. They are also going to be pulling in any kind of records from the Department of Mental Health and the Department of Public Health. So in several different ways, this bill is much more comprehensive than bills in other states that I can find, because I don't know of other states that actually pull in to one comprehensive registry from all those other departments, and they certainly don't pull from the courts. So the court portion is the historic part.
Okay, and so you've got this one on the books here. What's next for Jo Holcombe?
This needs to be a national mandate. As I have explained to people, and anyone who lives in Mobile understands, if you are convicted in Mobile, Alabama, what is to keep you from driving 30 minutes to Mississippi or 45 minutes to Florida? You don't even have to move out of your house, and you can continue abusing and doing what you're doing in 2 other states. this has got to happen. Now, the registry that we have in place, because of the sensitive nature with the DHR, even the conviction part is not publicly searchable at this point. So I do want a national registry that is publicly searchable. I don't know how that will work with this registry we have now. If we will have to just go with another national mandate, or if this registry at some point will be separated out, I don't know that. We haven't gotten to that point yet.
Yeah, but at least the companies that hire caregivers, they have access to this database.
Oh, absolutely.
So, okay.
Absolutely. And they are mandated to check it now. So that's the other portion, is anyone who hires people that are in direct contact with an elderly person or either an adult in need of protection is mandated to check this registry.
And so if they don't, then they can be held liable.
Absolutely.
All right. Jo, this is something I know that you probably never in a million years dreamed that you would be in the position that you're in, and that this idea came to you and you helped push this into the law. So what have you learned about yourself during this process?
I've always known I was pretty stubborn. But I think I learned that, particularly working with the legislature, that old adage that you can catch more flies with honey than vinegar is really true. And that you can do that. You can be persistent and still be very nice, and you will be well received. And I think it's just that persistent, the polite persistence, if you can coin that term, I think would be what I would say. And just, I guess I'm proud not only of the accomplishment, but I'm proud of the fact that I was able to find a way to channel all the negative emotion I had into something that was positive, and not just positive for me, but for positive and helpful for others. What this woman stole from our family, if you really boil it down and think about it, is she stole time. She stole time that could have been spent in so many other ways with my mother, rather than reassuring her that she was safe. And my mother's quality of life and world was very, very small because of her health. And just think of what she could have done, and what a difference that 212 days could have been like had this not happened. I tell people that the song, the band Diamond Rio, which says just one more day with you, I don't wonder about one day. I wonder about 212. And I don't ever want another family to have to be in that situation.
I mean, this wasn't an easy task that, you came up with, but, there's a lot of perseverance here. But, while it was going on, did you ever just want to give up?
No.
What kept you from not giving up?
I think I would see my mother's face, and just the desire that no one else ever deserved to live like that. And I didn't want any other family member to ever have to go through it again.
Hey, Jo, what advice would you give for family members that might be suspecting elder abuse is going on, but they don't know for sure? What advice would you give them as to what they ought to do?
First and foremost, trust your gut. And it is better to investigate and be wrong than to not investigate and be right. And so there is a stigma, I think, still about this. I hear horror stories about elder abuse and where families were afraid to speak up. They didn't want people to know that it happened to them. This is not a crime that discriminates. I don't care how well you can vet a person. We thought we had vetted this person. She had worked at one point for an agency that had promised us they had done all the vetting. And later, when she was not working for the agency, because we had loved her so, we pulled her in as a private, caregiver. We thought we had done all of our due diligence. It happened to us. It happens to anyone. So no one is immune. It doesn't matter how much education or how wealthy you are. In fact, I think probably the more wealthy, the more susceptible you might be. And don't be afraid. Don't think that you are in any way immune. And certainly, if you think it is a family member, don't be afraid to speak up. So many people will not report because they're afraid of a family member, or even horribly, sometimes it's the family member who's the caregiver as well as the abuser. And so the family remains silent because if they get rid of the caregiver that's doing the abuse, then who's going to take care of the person?
Well, and let me broaden the question out, because Rocket Motivation, the podcast, it's all about, dealing with and overcoming adversity. So based upon what you've been through, the listeners are listening, they're just either going through some tough times, separate and apart from the elder abuse stuff, but just in general, they're down on their luck, they're trying to get through some tough stuff. What advice would you give them?
I think truly one day at a time, and to look for the positive in each day. Because I know some days you can get very, very discouraged, and try to find at least one positive thing in that day and hold on to it. Write it down so that when the days are really, really bad, you can look back through and see all the good things that have happened and that they build upon each other. And if you really, really feel strongly about something, don't let anybody discourage you. All those people who shrug their shoulders, they now are like, wow, that's amazing. And it is. And I don't blame them for shrugging their shoulders. It was obviously not meant for them to do that. And I thank them in a way, because in shrugging their shoulders, they kind of made me a little angry and pushed me.
Right.
But don't let other people, or just complacency, or not knowing what to do, or giving you a good, clear answer, be a reason for you not to do something. I would rather do something and fail than not do anything at all.
Well, Jo, it has been my pleasure having you on the show. This has been a great story. And it's more than just a great story, because, this is something great. You've taken a horrible incident, and then you've taken your anger and your rage, and you have turned it into something concrete that is good.
Thank you.
I would think your personal satisfaction, we don't want to strain our shoulder by patting ourselves on the back, but you've got to have some real satisfaction about what you've accomplished.
I do, but I think more than that, I'm just so incredibly humbled. I've often said, I didn't choose this. It chose me, and I do think there are times in your life that you encounter pivotal moments, and depending upon which way you go, it's going to alter the direction and the course of your life. And this certainly did mine. And I chose to pursue what I thought was justice for Mother. And in the process, I hoped and did find, I think, justice for others. And I think I take, more pride in knowing that the law doesn't just help Mother, but it will help others for years to come. And I'm just humbled by the fact that I get to be a part of it.
Right. That's great. Jo, if someone wants to learn more about Shirley's Law, how can they do it?
First, they can just simply Google it, and they can find the actual law, and they can find a lot of other information out there. Secondly, if they want to ask me a direct question, I would welcome that. And the email address I have is Shirley's Law, AL for Alabama. So it's SHIRLEYSLAWAL@gmail.com.
And if somebody wants to, if there's some people out there that have kind of gone through this and they want to join your cause, I would assume you would welcome other people into the cause.
I would welcome them.
And how can they do that?
Email me. I would gladly talk to them, and love to have some more ideas and some more heads thinking about what to do next.
And we'll have that information on the website and in the show notes. Well, Jo, again, thanks you so much for coming on. And although this next question, which is going to be the last one, may not be fair because you've given so many thoughtful, wonderful answers and some great advice, but I always give the guest the parting shot. And so this is the time where I ask you, dig even deeper, something we hadn't talked about yet. Give us something great to take us home.
Good can triumph over evil. It still does, and it can again. I have the proof of it.
Well, that's a great way to end. Jo, it's been a pleasure having you.
Thank you.
Great episode with Jo Holcombe, taking her anger and rage over what happened to her mother and using it positively to try to stop this from happening to others. You have to love Jo's perseverance. We'll have another great guest on Rocket Motivation next week. See you then. Thanks again for listening to Rocket Motivation. I want to again thank our sponsor, Christy McCullough, and her firm, Empowered Family Law. Listeners in the Mobile County, Alabama area, get in touch with Chrissy and Empowered Family Law for all your family law issues and needs. If you would like to get my book, Get Back Up, it's available at Amazon. Just put in Get Back Up and my name, Rod Cate, and the book will pop up. I'd appreciate it if you would subscribe to Rocket Motivation wherever you listen to your podcasts. And please rate and review the shows and spread the word about Rocket Motivation to your friends. So until next time, remember, never give up and always get back up.